The morning sun barely filtered through the tall windows of Riverside Academy as the students dragged themselves into the building, chatter filling the hallways. It was supposed to be just another day, another routine in the endless cycle of classes, assignments, and teenage drama. But inside the advanced physics lab on the second floor, a story was about to unfold that no one would ever forget. Dr. Elena Vasquez was the new physics teacher. She wasn't young like the fresh graduates the prestigious academy usually hired, but not too old either. Somewhere in her mid-30s, with sharp eyes and a presence that commanded silence without her even trying. The students whispered about her, saying she was too strict, too cold, too secretive. No one knew where she came from. She wore long-sleeve blouses, even in warm weather. Her posture always upright like a soldier. Her gaze sharp like she could read every thought in the room. For weeks, the students speculated about her. Some said she was divorced. Others said she was just lonely. And a few whispered something darker, that she wasn't just a teacher, but someone who had lived another life before stepping into this classroom. They were right, but no one knew the truth yet. The expensive hallways of Riverside Academy buzzed with the usual morning energy. Designer backpacks, luxury cars dropping off students, the kind of privilege that money could buy. But Dr. Vasquez moved through it all with a different kind of authority, one that couldn't be purchased. Her physics demonstrations were precise, controlled, methodical. When she handled equipment, her movements were economical, purposeful. Students noticed she never fumbled with apparatus, never second-guessed measurements. There was something about the way she carried herself that suggested discipline forged elsewhere, in places far removed from academic comfort. The advanced physics lab itself was state-of-the-art, filled with equipment worth more than most people's homes. But Dr. Vasquez treated it all with professional detachment, as if expensive machinery was just another tool in a kit she'd assembled long ago. Her voice carried authority that made even the most entitled students straighten unconsciously. In every elite class, there was always one, the bully, the boy who thought the world belonged to him, who believed teachers were beneath him, who had never been told no in his life. His name was Trevor Hamilton, the son of a wealthy real estate mogul who practically owned half the city. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a face that always carried an arrogant smirk, Trevor was used to fear and obedience. The teachers either tolerated him or ignored his outbursts because they feared his father's power. Marcus Hamilton's development company had built half the luxury condos in the area, and his donations to Riverside Academy were legendary. Trevor wore designer clothes that cost more than most people's monthly salaries, drove a BMW his father bought for his 16th birthday, and carried himself like royalty among peasants. He mocked classmates, shoved smaller students into lockers, cheated on tests with expensive tutoring services, and when caught, simply shrugged as if the rules were written for others, not him. His father's influence stretched through the school's board of directors, ensuring Trevor faced consequences only when absolutely unavoidable. And even then, those consequences were minimal. Dr. Vasquez was different. She didn't flinch when he mocked her lessons, didn't stutter when he raised his voice. She simply looked at him with those piercing eyes of hers, and that alone made him uneasy. Trevor didn't like being made uneasy. He didn't like being reminded that he wasn't in control. His friends, a collection of equally entitled students from wealthy families, followed his lead because his father's money provided access to exclusive parties, expensive trips, and protection from academic consequences. They laughed at his jokes, supported his cruelty, and enabled his behavior because association with Trevor meant social status and material benefits. The physics classroom became Trevor's testing ground, a place where he could probe this new teacher's limits and establish dominance. His usual tactics had worked on every other instructor, reducing them to nervous compliance or resigned tolerance. But Dr. Vasquez seemed immune to intimidation, responding to his provocations with calm professionalism that only infuriated him more. The tension had been building for weeks. Trevor Hamilton tested Dr. Vasquez's boundaries with the methodical precision of a predator probing for weakness. During her lectures on momentum and energy, he would lean back in his chair, arms crossed, smirking as his friends snickered beside him. His disruptions were calculated, designed to undermine her authority without crossing lines that would force administrative intervention. "Hey, Dr. Vasquez," he drawled one afternoon, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Are you sure you know what you're talking about? Or are you just reading from the textbook like everyone else?" The class chuckled nervously. Everyone knew Trevor's game. Poke, insult, humiliate until someone broke. Dr. Vasquez didn't even look at him. "Focus on your calculations, Trevor. Your lab report is already 2 days late." Her calm dismissal stung him like a slap. Trevor's jaw tightened. No one dismissed him. He was used to teachers stumbling over their words, trying to appease him. "Don't tell me what to focus on," he snapped, his voice carrying across the lab. "You're not my boss. My dad's donations pay your salary." A hush fell over the advanced physics class. Some students tried to hide their smiles. Others held their breath. Everyone was waiting to see how Dr. Vasquez would respond. She turned slowly, her eyes locking on his. That gaze was colder than ice, sharper than any blade. Trevor shifted uncomfortably under it, but forced a grin. "You may think your father's money controls this place," she said, her tone calm, deliberate, each word striking like a bullet. "But in this classroom, physics and discipline control everything. Complete your assignment." The finality in her voice was like a wall he couldn't break. For a second, Trevor hesitated, unsure why his heart skipped a beat. But pride was poison, and he swallowed too much of it. His friends were watching. The whole class was watching. He couldn't back down now. Each day brought new provocations. Trevor would arrive late, interrupt demonstrations, mock her explanations of complex theories. Dr. Vasquez maintained professional composure, but something in her eyes suggested depths of experience that made even Trevor's boldest challenges seem childish. That particular Thursday morning in the advanced physics lab, the air was thick with anticipation. Dr. Vasquez had announced they would be conducting controlled explosive demonstrations to illustrate kinetic energy transfer and pressure wave mechanics. Glass beakers lined the lab tables, specialized equipment hummed quietly, and the usual buzz of students pretending to work while gossiping filled the space. Dr. Vasquez moved between the lab tables with her usual calm stride, adjusting pressure gauges here, calibrating measurement devices there. Her movements were precise, methodical, like someone who understood that carelessness with explosive materials carried deadly consequences. Trevor leaned against his table, arms crossed, smirking as his friends snickered beside him. The demonstration involved small controlled charges designed to show how energy transferred through different materials. Safety protocols were extensive, protective barriers in place, but the potential for danger made every student more attentive than usual. All except Trevor, who saw the heightened stakes as an opportunity for greater disruption. "Hey, Dr. Vasquez," he drawled loud enough for everyone to hear, interrupting her explanation of blast mechanics. "Are you sure you're qualified to handle explosives? Or did you learn this from watching action movies?" The class chuckled nervously, but there was an edge to their laughter now. Even Trevor's boldest supporters sensed that mocking someone handling explosive materials crossed different boundaries. Dr. Vasquez didn't even look at him. "Observe the pressure readings, Trevor. Your calculations need to account for atmospheric density variations." Her calm dismissal during such a delicate procedure infuriated him more than usual. This wasn't ordinary classroom defiance anymore. The controlled charges were small, designed for educational purposes, but they required absolute precision in timing and placement. Dr. Vasquez demonstrated the setup with steady hands, explaining how military demolitions experts calculated blast effects and collateral damage. Her technical knowledge seemed unusually detailed, as if drawn from experience rather than textbooks. Trevor's disrespectful behavior intensified as the demonstration continued. He made jokes about explosions, mimicked her safety instructions, and deliberately ignored protocols while she worked with increasingly dangerous materials. The confrontation was building to a breaking point. Trevor's behavior had crossed from disrespectful to dangerous as Dr. Vasquez worked with the controlled explosive materials. The other students sensed the shift in atmosphere, some moving slightly away from Trevor's station, others pulling out phones to record what felt like an inevitable collision between unstoppable arrogance and immovable authority. Dr. Vasquez maintained her professional composure, but her movements became more deliberate, more controlled. She secured the explosive materials with practiced efficiency, her hands steady despite Trevor's escalating provocations. Every safety protocol was followed precisely, as if she understood that carelessness in volatile situations could have catastrophic consequences. Trevor, emboldened by what he perceived as her continued tolerance, pushed further. He knocked over a graduated cylinder, sending glass fragments across the floor near the demonstration area. When Dr. Vasquez paused to ensure no contamination had occurred, he laughed loudly, drawing attention to his deliberate sabotage. "Oops," he said with theatrical innocence, his voice dripping with mock concern. "Hope that wasn't important for your little science experiment, Dr. Vasquez. Maybe you should stick to safer lessons if you can't handle accidents." His friends erupted in nervous laughter, but their amusement carried an edge of genuine fear now. Dr. Vasquez looked up from securing the materials, her expression unchanged but something flickering in her eyes. "Clean up the glass, Trevor." Immediately, her voice carried a new quality, harder than before, with undertones that made several students straighten involuntarily. "I don't think so," Trevor replied, stepping closer to her demonstration table. His proximity to the controlled explosive setup was deliberate intimidation, showing he felt no fear of her or her authority. "You clean it up if it bothers you so much. I'm not your janitor." The classroom had fallen silent except for the quiet hum of equipment and the sound of nervous breathing. Dr. Vasquez stood between Trevor and the explosive materials, her posture shifting subtly into something that looked less like a teacher and more like someone prepared for confrontation. The change was almost imperceptible, but those watching closely noticed her weight distributing differently, her stance becoming more balanced. The moment arrived with devastating suddenness. Trevor, blinded by arrogance and emboldened by years of unchallenged privilege, made the decision that would destroy everything he thought he owned. Dr. Vasquez had turned back to secure the remaining explosive materials when Trevor decided to assert physical dominance over this teacher who dared to treat him like any other student. In a reckless burst of rage, he did something no student should ever dream of doing. He reached out, grabbed Dr. Vasquez by the throat, and shoved her back against the lab counter, dangerously close to the controlled explosive demonstration setup. Gasps echoed through the room. Chairs scraped as students stood up in shock. Some fumbled for their phones, others froze in disbelief. For a heartbeat, the world froze. Trevor's hand clenched around her neck, his face twisted in triumph. "What now, huh?" he spat, his grip tightening. "What will you do now that Daddy's money can't save you?" His friends stared in horrified fascination, finally understanding they were witnessing something that would have consequences far beyond their shelter experience. But then it happened. Dr. Vasquez's eyes didn't widen in fear, they narrowed. In that split second, something shifted in the room. The mild-mannered physics teacher was gone, and in her place, something far deadlier stood. Years of training, of combat, of discipline buried under the facade of a quiet educator surged to the surface like a dam bursting. Her hand shot up like lightning, gripping Trevor's wrist in an iron hold that made him gasp in sudden pain. Trevor's smug expression faltered as he realized his fingers were being peeled away from her throat with mechanical precision. Her other hand moved with fluid efficiency, striking a pressure point that sent shooting pain up his arm and made his grip loosen involuntarily. The transformation was instantaneous and terrifying. This wasn't just a teacher defending herself. This was someone who had moved with lethal precision in places far more dangerous than any classroom. Trevor's eyes widened as he finally understood that he had grabbed the throat of someone whose training had been forged in combat zones where hesitation meant death. Her voice, when she spoke, was deadly calm. You don't know who you're dealing with. What happened next would be replayed in smartphone videos 1,000 times. But no recording could capture the surgical precision of train lethality unleashed in a high school physics lab. Dr. Vasquez moved with movements that were fluid, economical, and devastatingly effective. This wasn't random self-defense. This was Special Forces combat training applied with textbook precision. In one seamless motion, she twisted Trevor's wrist beyond its natural range, using his own grip against him while her other hand struck his elbow joint with calculated force. The sound of his body impacting the lab counter-rang like thunder across the room. Trevor's arrogant smirk vanished, replaced by shock and genuine fear as he realized he was completely outmatched. She spun behind him with dancer-like grace, locking his arm behind his back in a hold that immobilized him completely. The pressure was precise, painful enough to ensure compliance, but controlled enough to avoid permanent damage. Trevor struggled against her grip, but the more he fought, the more the joint lock tightened, sending waves of pain through his shoulder and arm. The entire class froze, mouths open, eyes wide with disbelief. Dr. Vasquez hadn't just defended herself. She had neutralized a much larger opponent with techniques that belonged in military training manuals, not suburban classrooms. Her breathing remained steady, controlled, while Trevor gasped and struggled against the inexorable physics of leverage and applied force. Her voice, when she spoke, carried the authority of someone accustomed to life-and-death situations. "You picked the wrong person to intimidate, Trevor." The words were quiet, almost conversational, but they cut through the silence like a blade. Every student in that room understood they were witnessing the real Dr. Vasquez, the person who existed beneath the teacher's professional facade. She pressed him down against the counter, his face inches from the explosive demonstration materials he had so carelessly mocked. The irony wasn't lost on anyone watching. Trevor Hamilton, who had terrorized students and teachers with his father's wealth and influence, was now completely helpless in the grip of someone whose training came from places where money meant nothing and competence meant survival. "Apologize," she commanded, her voice carrying military authority that made even uninvolved students want to comply. The word cracked through the silence like a rifle shot. Trevor groaned, trying to twist free, but her hold only intensified. His friends didn't dare move. Nobody did. For the first time in his life, Trevor Hamilton wasn't in control. He was prey caught in the grip of a predator he never saw coming. The boy who had terrorized so many students, who had laughed in the faces of teachers, was now trembling, sweat trickling down his temple. "Say it," Dr. Vasquez repeated, her tone laced with steel that had been forged in combat zones far from academic comfort. The joint lock applied exactly enough pressure to ensure compliance without causing permanent damage, a technique refined through years of Special Forces training where controlling opponents meant mission success. "I'm sorry," Trevor stammered, his voice breaking with humiliation and genuine fear. "I'm sorry." The words came out choked, desperate, completely stripped of the arrogance that had defined him since childhood. His designer clothes were wrinkled, his perfectly styled hair disheveled, his face flushed with shame and pain. Dr. Vasquez released him with a controlled movement that demonstrated the same precision she had used to neutralize him. Trevor stumbled forward, clutching his arm, his legs unsteady from shock and adrenaline. He had never experienced physical helplessness before, never understood what it felt like to be completely overpowered by superior skill and training. The room was frozen in absolute silence. No one laughed. No one dared. The casual cruelty that had defined Trevor's interactions was gone, replaced by the stark reality of consequences he had never imagined possible. His friends, who had enabled his behavior for years, stared at him with expressions mixing horror and fascination. Dr. Vasquez stood tall, adjusting her sleeves with movements that seemed impossibly calm after the violent precision she had just displayed. Her expression returned to professional neutrality, but everyone in that room had seen what lay beneath the teacher's facade. The transformation back to educator was almost more unsettling than the combat expertise she had revealed. She looked at the class, her voice steady and controlled. Class dismissed. The words carried finality that brooked no argument. Students began gathering their things in stunned silence, their movements careful and respectful. The casual disrespect that had characterized their interactions with Dr. Vasquez was permanently shattered. Trevor remained against the counter, still processing what had happened to him. That day, whispers spread like wildfire through the prestigious corridors of Riverside Academy. The physics teacher wasn't just a teacher. She was something else, something dangerous. And Trevor Hamilton, the untouchable bully whose father's real estate empire had protected him from consequences, had been destroyed in front of everyone, not with empty threats, but with terrifying precision that belonged in military training facilities, not academic institutions. Word traveled through the elite student body with digital speed. Smartphone videos captured fragments of the confrontation, showing Trevor's complete helplessness in Dr. Vasquez's grip. Social media erupted with speculation about her background, her training, her mysterious past that suddenly made perfect sense of her bearing and discipline. The revelation transformed how everyone viewed Dr. Vasquez. Her precise movements during physics demonstrations took on new meaning. Her calm authority in managing classroom disruptions revealed itself as combatist leadership. Her detailed knowledge of explosive mechanics and pressure dynamics suddenly seemed less like academic theory and more like operational experience. Students who had witnessed her neutralize Trevor described the encounter in hushed, awed tones. She moved like she'd done it 1,000 times before. One sophomore whispered to her friends. That wasn't luck or self-defense training from a weekend course. That was military combat expertise applied with surgical precision. Faculty members began connecting dots they had previously overlooked. Dr. Vasquez's resume had been notably sparse on details before her arrival at Riverside Academy. Her interview responses about classroom management and student discipline had carried undertones of experience that seemed disproportionate to civilian education backgrounds. The school's security footage, reviewed by administrators trying to understand what had occurred, showed the confrontation from multiple angles. Trevor's unprovoked assault was clearly documented, as was Dr. Vasquez's measured, professional response. Her techniques were textbook examples of non-lethal force application, designed to neutralize threats without causing permanent injury. Principal Morrison, reviewing the incident, found himself researching Special Forces training protocols to understand what he had witnessed. The joint locks, pressure point strikes, and controlled takedown techniques Dr. Vasquez had employed were consistent with military close-quarters combat training that took years to master and required constant practice to maintain. By evening, Dr. Elena Vasquez was no longer the quiet, mysterious physics teacher. She was the decorated Special Forces veteran who had been hiding in plain sight. Marcus Hamilton arrived at Riverside Academy in his black Mercedes, flanked by 2 expensive attorneys and radiating the kind of fury that money and influence usually made disappear. As the city's most powerful real estate developer, he was accustomed to problems vanishing with the right combination of donations, threats, and legal pressure. But this problem involved his son's humiliation and a teacher who had dared to lay hands on Hamilton. Principal Morrison met them in his office, surrounded by school board members who normally defer to Hamilton's considerable donations and political connections. Security footage played on multiple screens, showing Trevor's unprovoked assault and DR. Vasquez's professional defensive response. The evidence was unambiguous, devastating, and legally bulletproof. "This is unacceptable," Hamilton thundered, his voice carrying the authority of someone who owned half the commercial buildings in the city. "That woman assaulted my son. I demand her immediate termination and criminal charges filed." His attorneys nodded, already preparing the legal documents they assumed would resolve this unfortunate incident. Dr. Morrison, usually intimidated by Hamilton's presence, remained surprisingly calm. "Marcus, we need to discuss what actually happened in that classroom." The security footage shows Trevor grabbing Dr. Vasquez by the throat first. She defended herself using appropriate, measured force. No criminal conduct occurred on her part. The room's atmosphere shifted as Hamilton realized his usual tactics wouldn't work. The school board members, normally compliant when facing his influence, had been briefed on Dr. Vasquez's military background and the legal implications of the assault. Trevor had attacked a decorated Special Forces veteran who had responded with textbook defensive procedures. His lead attorney, James Crawford, reviewed the evidence with growing concern. "Marcus, we have a problem." The footage clearly shows Trevor initiating physical contact. Dr. Vasquez's response appears measured and appropriate for someone with her training. Any prosecution would likely result in charges against Trevor, not the teacher. Hamilton's face reddened as he processed the impossible reality. His money, his connections, his development company's influence over municipal politics. None of it mattered when faced with documented evidence and legal facts. Trevor had committed assault against a military veteran who had defended herself appropriately. The final blow came when the school board's attorney explained Trevor's potential legal exposure. Assault charges, possible expulsion proceedings, and civil liability that could follow him through college applications and beyond. The fallout from the physics lab incident was swift and merciless. Within 48 hours, smartphone videos of Trevor's humiliation had spread beyond Riverside Academy's elite walls, reaching social media platforms where his assault on Dr. Vasquez was dissected, analyzed, and condemned by thousands of viewers. The footage showed everything: his unprovoked attack, her surgical defensive response, and his complete breakdown. College admissions offices, already sensitive to character issues among applicants, began receiving the viral videos with Trevor's name attached. His early acceptance to Duke University was quietly withdrawn. Stanford followed suit. Princeton's admissions committee voted unanimously to rescind his provisional acceptance after reviewing the assault footage and disciplinary reports from Riverside Academy. His friends, the wealthy enablers who had laughed at his cruelty for years, distanced themselves with the calculating precision their families had taught them. Social invitations dried up. Group chats excluded him. The exclusive parties his father's money had always guaranteed access to were suddenly unavailable. His social circle evaporated like morning dew under scrutiny. The Hamilton Development Company's board of directors, concerned about the negative publicity affecting their luxury real estate projects, pressured Marcus to address his son's behavior publicly. Corporate clients began questioning whether they wanted to associate with a company whose heir had assaulted a decorated military veteran in a classroom setting. Trevor's college prospects collapsed entirely as word spread through academic networks. Admissions counselors shared warnings about the liability and character risks he represented. His SAT scores and athletic achievements became irrelevant compared to documented evidence of violent behavior against an educator. Private schools that had courted his father's donations suddenly had no available spots. Local news outlets picked up the story, framing it as entitled wealth versus military service and sacrifice. Dr. Vasquez's Special Forces background was revealed through Freedom of Information requests, showing her decorated service record and multiple combat deployments. The contrast with Trevor's privileged background created a narrative that resonated powerfully with audiences. His reputation became a cautionary tale shared throughout elite social circles. Parents used Trevor Hamilton as an example of how unchecked privilege could destroy everything their families had built. The name that once opened doors now closed them permanently, carrying associations with violence, entitlement, and spectacular public failure. Within weeks, Trevor Hamilton had transformed from untouchable heir to pariah, whose presence threatened the reputations of anyone associated with him.